Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. My name is James. When I overheard my wife confess something that shattered every fragile hope I'd clung to for years, it didn't just sting, it unraveled the shaky foundation of our marriage. Once that truth was out, there was no stitching it back together. This is the story of how I reached that breaking point, what led up to it, how those words cut through me, and what I decided to do next. Let me start at the beginning where it all took root. I met Clara at a time when we were both wading through our own versions of isolation. In that shared emptiness, we somehow found each other. I just lost my mother, the only family I had left. My father passed when I was a kid, so my mom was my anchor, raising me single-handedly with a kind of quiet strength. She worked endless shifts but still made time for the little things, helping with math homework, cheering at my games, or just sitting with me in silence when I needed it. As I grew up, got a steady job, and started building a life, I dreamed of giving back to her, maybe taking her on a trip, or just being there for her the way she'd always been for me. But life had other plans. Cancer came for her, sudden and relentless. She'd fought it off once years before, but this time it was merciless. Before I could even grasp the weight of it, she was gone. Grief swallowed me whole. I had no one to turn to, no siblings, no close relatives, and my friends were too wrapped up in their own worlds to notice. That's when Clara came into my life. She just moved to town, a stranger in a new place, trying to find her footing. She lived a few doors down from my mom's house. During my mom's final weeks, when work kept me away, I asked Clara, who I barely knew, to check on her occasionally. She didn't hesitate. She'd bring over meals, make sure mom took her pills, or just sit with her, chatting about nothing and everything. My mom adored her, always saying Clara had a good heart. I started talking to Clara more, first about my mom, then about life. She didn't try to fix me or fill the silence with empty words. She just listened. In that quiet, something sparked between us. After mom's funeral, the loneliness was suffocating. Her house felt like a hollow shell, and Clara was the only person who felt like home. She'd been there through the worst of it, and in a way, she understood my pain without me having to spell it out. We started spending more time together. It wasn't some grand romance, but it was steady, like a lifeline I could cling to. Looking back, I think I mistook comfort for something deeper. There wasn't that electric connection I'd felt in past relationships, but I told myself that kind of thing was fleeting, overrated. Maybe what mattered more was someone kind, someone who stayed. So when we started dating, it wasn't a whirlwind of passion. It was calm, predictable. We both carried our scars, and we leaned on each other because no one else was there. That's where the trouble began, though I didn't see it then. Sometimes, a bond built on mutual survival isn't enough to last, but I was too lost in my grief to realize it. I thought we were in it for the long haul, that we'd found something solid. That belief would be tested later, but back then, I thought we were fine. After 2 years of dating and sharing a small apartment, one quiet evening in the living room, Clara looked at me and said, "What if we just got married?" I was caught off guard, not in a bad way, but it wasn't something I'd been planning. Still, I thought, why not? Here was someone who'd stood by me when my world collapsed. She didn't flinch when things got heavy, staying through the dark days after mom's death. When you're broken, loyalty starts to feel like love. I told myself this was what real relationships were, steady, not flashy. So I said yes. We didn't have a big wedding. Neither of us had much family, and I didn't have the energy for anything elaborate. It was a small ceremony, just a handful of people. But deep down, I knew something was off. Clara had always had this wall around her, emotionally distant in a way I couldn't quite reach. When I tried to open up about my feelings, she'd go quiet, offering nothing back. I told myself people express love differently. Maybe she'd been hurt before, and I just needed to be patient. But even then, I noticed she never said, "I love you," unless I said it first. It was never her initiative, never unprompted. When she suggested marriage, I thought it was her way of showing commitment, of finally letting me in. I was wrong, but I wouldn't see how wrong until much later. After the wedding, I kept waiting for things to shift, for that deeper connection with Clara to take root. I thought marriage might be the key to unlocking something more, maybe a sense of closeness, or even just a comfortable rhythm. But the truth is, nothing changed. If anything, the distance between us grew, like a slow leak in a tire you don't notice until you're stranded. The early days of our marriage weren't filled with the joy or excitement I'd heard about from others. There was no honeymoon phase, no spark of newfound intimacy. Instead, what settled in was a quiet, creeping sense that something was wrong, though I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It started with small things. Clara would go silent for days, not just quiet but cold, like she was somewhere else entirely. I come home from work, ask about her day, and get a shrug or a curt it was fine. Her tone wasn't angry, just flat, like she was checking a box. I try to dig deeper, ask if something was bothering her, but she'd brush it off with excuses, work stress, a headache, or just needing some time to herself. Those answers never invited me in, never opened the door to a real conversation. It felt like she was politely telling me to back off, and I listened. I stopped pushing, convincing myself it wasn't personal, even though it felt like a knife to the chest. The truth was, I wasn't happy, but I kept quiet. Clara had been there when I lost my mom, standing by me through the worst of it. That loyalty meant something to me, and I told myself it deserved patience in return. So I tried to be the steady one, giving her space, showing up with kindness even when it wasn't returned. I thought if I kept at it, things would eventually shift. Maybe she'd open up, and we'd find our way to something real. Then, out of the blue, Clara announced she was going to start therapy. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was her way of finally addressing whatever was keeping her so guarded. Maybe we'd finally be able to talk, to bridge the gap that had grown between us. I asked if she wanted me to join her for a session, thinking it could be a chance to work on things together. She said no, firmly, and I didn't push. I figured therapy was personal, and she'd share when she was ready. But weeks passed, and nothing changed. I'd ask, how was therapy? Hoping for a glimpse into what she was working through. She'd just say, it was fine, or nothing special, and change the subject. It was another wall, another door slammed shut. I didn't want to pry, but I was her husband, and it stung to feel like an outsider in her world. Still, I stayed. I told myself she'd open up eventually, that patience would pay off. But the silence between us grew heavier, and I started to wonder if I was fooling myself. The house we shared felt less like a home and more like a space where two people coexisted, passing each other like ships in the night. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I was doing wrong. Was I not trying hard enough? Was I missing something? I started to question whether love was supposed to feel this lonely. One evening, I came home earlier than usual. A client meeting got canceled, so I figured I'd surprise Clara, maybe cook dinner together or just spend some time with her. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a car parked out front, one I vaguely recognized as belonging to her friend, Sarah. I didn't think much of it. Clara didn't have many close friends, so I was glad she was spending time with someone. I walked into the house, dropped my keys on the counter, and heard soft voices coming from the kitchen. They must have been catching up, maybe having a drink. I wasn't planning to interrupt, just wanted to say a quick hello before heading upstairs to change. As I got closer to the kitchen, I heard Clara's voice, low and a little unsteady, like she'd had a glass of wine. I paused, not wanting to barge in mid-conversation. That's when I heard her say it. I didn't marry James because I loved him. My heart stopped. The air felt like it was sucked out of the room. She went on, her words cutting deeper with every syllable. I was just so tired of being alone. He's nice, you know, safe. But that's it. I thought maybe I'd grow to love him, but I don't. Sarah's voice came next, soft and shocked. You don't love him at all? Clara didn't hesitate. No, I never did. I just didn't want to keep searching for something else. Each word was a hammer, smashing the fragile hope I'd been holding on to. Suddenly, everything made sense. The distance, the silence, the lack of affection. It wasn't just her being guarded or needing time. She'd never loved me, not even at the start. I was just a safety net, someone to fill the void because she was too tired to keep looking for what she really wanted. I stood there, frozen, unable to move or breathe. I didn't step into the kitchen. My feet felt glued to the floor, Clara's words echoing in my head like a cruel refrain. I never loved him. The truth of it was a blade, slicing through every excuse I'd made for her distance, every hope I'd clung to that we could build something real. I turned around, moving like a shadow, and slipped back through the house. My heart pounded, but my steps were quiet, deliberate. I climbed the stairs, walked in my study, and locked the door behind me, a door we'd never locked before. Clara and I didn't have secrets, or so I thought. But that lock felt like the only thing holding me together, a thin barrier between me and the collapse of everything I believed in. I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, her words replaying over and over. Safe. Nice. But that's it. I wasn't her love, her partner. I was her fallback plan, a placeholder to keep loneliness at bay. The clarity of it was suffocating. All those moments I chalked up to her being reserved or needing time. Her silences, her half-hearted responses, the way she'd pull away when I tried to get close. They weren't quirks or temporary walls. They were the truth she'd never spoken. I'd built a life with someone who saw me as a compromise. Hours passed in that study. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just sat there, numb, piecing together the last few years. Every time she'd dodged a real conversation, every time I felt like I was begging for a scrap of affection, it all made sense now. I thought about the early days, how I'd mistaken her kindness for love, how I'd convinced myself that steady was better than passionate. I'd been so desperate for something to hold on to after Mom's death that I'd ignored the signs. The room grew darker as the sun set, but I didn't turn on the light. I didn't want to see anything clearly, not yet. Eventually, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Sarah must have left. Clara must have noticed my car in the driveway. She tried the study door, the knob rattling softly. James, her voice came through, tentative. Are you in there? I didn't answer. She knocked again, a little louder, confusion creeping into her tone. My phone buzzed on the desk, her name on the screen. I stared at it, my thumb hovering before picking up. Please don't, I said, my voice low and steady, though I felt like I was shaking inside. I just need some space. She went quiet on the other end, and I hung up before she could respond. She didn't try again. Maybe she thought I was just in a mood, or maybe she sensed something was different. She had no idea I'd heard her confession, that the ground beneath us had already crumbled. I stayed in that study all night, the locked door a silent declaration that something had shifted. By morning, my mind was clearer, not calm, but resolved. Clara's words had stripped away the illusions I'd been holding on to. We had no kids, no shared mortgage, nothing tying us together except a marriage that meant nothing to her. The only thing I'd given her of real value was the car I'd bought for our last anniversary, a gesture that felt hollow now. As the first light crept through the window, I knew I couldn't stay in this house, in this life, any longer. I waited until I heard Clara leave for work, the familiar sound of her car pulling out of the driveway. Only then did I move. I walked to our bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and started packing. Clothes, a few books, my laptop. Only what I needed. I didn't linger, didn't let myself look at the photos on the dresser or the little things that marked our years together. I locked the front door behind me and drove to a hotel on the edge of town. Sitting on the stiff, unfamiliar bed, I opened my laptop and emailed my boss, saying I had an emergency and wouldn't be in. He replied later, telling me to take the time I needed. Next, I looked up a divorce lawyer and sent a message to set up a consultation. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Clara's words had made one thing painfully clear. I couldn't keep living as her safety net. Checked into the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, the sterile room feeling like a blank slate. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Clara's name flashing across the screen, call after call. I let them ring out, each one a reminder of the truth I couldn't unhear. I never loved him. Her words had carved a line between who I thought we were and what we actually were. By late afternoon, when I was sure she'd be home from work, the calls intensified. I pictured her walking into the house, seeing my missing clothes, the empty drawers, and realizing I was gone. Finally, I picked up. Her voice was frantic, confused. James, where are you? Why are your things gone? I took a breath, steadying myself. I'm not coming back, Clara. I won't be your placeholder anymore. There was a pause, her confusion palpable through the line. What are you talking about? She asked, her tone defensive, like she was grasping for control. I didn't soften the blow. I heard you last night. With Sarah. You said you never loved me, that I was just safe. I've been in a loveless marriage for years, and I'm done. Silence. She didn't deny it, didn't scramble to explain. Maybe she was too shocked, or maybe she knew there was no point. I didn't wait for her to find words. I'm filing for divorce, I said, and hung up. My phone kept buzzing after that, texts and voicemails piling up, but I didn't look. I'd said what I needed to. The next morning, I met with the divorce lawyer, a no-nonsense woman who listened as I laid out the basics. No kids, no shared property, just a marriage that had been a lie from the start. She nodded, jotting notes, and said she'd draft the papers. This should be straightforward, she told me, and I felt a strange relief at the word. Straightforward. For once, something in my life felt clear. Days later, the lawyer confirmed the papers were served. Clara must have received them, because her calls stopped for a while, replaced by a tense silence. Then, she shifted tactics. Mutual acquaintances started reaching out. Friends we hadn't seen in months, her cousin, even a co-worker I barely knew. They'd call or text, saying Clara was struggling, that she was working on herself in therapy, that she wanted to talk. One friend told me, she says she's starting to understand her feelings better. Maybe you could give it a chance. I listened politely, but my answer was always the same. I'm done. It wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about survival. I'd poured everything into a marriage that was never real for her, and I had nothing left to give. I started tying up loose ends. I contacted our landlord to remove my name from the lease, something I co-signed when we moved in together. It was a small thing, but it felt like cutting the last thread tying me to that life. The landlord was understanding, and within a week, it was done. My salary had already been going to a separate account for months, a habit I'd started without really knowing why. Now it felt like a small mercy, one less thing to untangle. Clara's texts started again, sporadic but persistent. Some were apologetic, others vague, like she was testing the waters. Can we just talk? One read. I don't want things to end like this, said another. I didn't respond. What was there to say? She'd built a marriage on convenience, and I'd been too blind to see it. The betrayal wasn't just her words. It was the years I'd spent trying to love someone who didn't love me back. I started rebuilding piece by piece. I found a small apartment, nothing fancy, but it was mine. I went back to work, throwing myself into projects to keep my mind busy. The lawyer kept me updated. Clara hadn't contested the divorce, which made things move faster. But even as the legal side fell into place, I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. Would she show up at my new place? Would she try to pull me back with promises of change? I didn't know what she was capable of, or if she even wanted to fight for us. Part of me wondered if she was as relieved as I was to let it all go. The divorce papers were signed, the lease was out of my name, and the legal ties binding me to Clara were severed. It was a clean break on paper, but the weight of it lingered. I'd moved into my new apartment, a small, quiet space that felt both foreign and freeing. The days were filled with routine, work, unpacking, settling into a life that was mine alone. But Clara didn't let go as easily as I'd hoped. Her texts came in waves, sometimes a simple "can we talk?" Other times longer, like she was trying to explain herself. I'm figuring things out in therapy, one message read. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I rarely responded, and when I did, it was brief, polite, but firm. There's nothing left to say. I'd write, or I'd ignore her altogether. I wasn't trying to be cruel. It was just that every word from her felt like an attempt to pull me back into a life I'd already left behind. She even tried reaching out through others again, her messages filtering through mutual friends who'd relay her pleas. She's really trying, James, one said. She says she's learning to be more open. I didn't doubt she was trying, but it was too late. The truth she'd spoken that night in the kitchen had stripped away any illusion that we could rebuild. I'd given her years of patience, years of hoping for a spark that was never there. I couldn't give her any more. One evening, about a month after the divorce was finalized, Clara called again. I was tempted to let it ring, but something made me pick up. Her voice was softer than usual, almost hesitant. "I just need you to know I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't realize what I was doing to you. I was scared, and I made a mess of everything." I listened, waiting for the part where she'd ask for another chance, but it didn't come. Instead, she said, "I hope you're okay, James." "I really do." For the first time, she sounded genuine, like she was letting go too. "I'm okay," I said, and I meant it. "Take care, Clara." I hung up, and that was the last time we spoke for a while. She still sent the occasional text, updates about her life, small attempts to stay connected. I'd reply if it felt necessary, but only out of a lingering sense of respect for what we'd once been to each other. Friendship wasn't on the table. Not now, maybe not ever. I needed space to rebuild, to figure out who I was without her shadow hanging over me. As weeks turned into months, I started to feel lighter. Work became a refuge, not just a distraction. I reconnected with old friends, ones I'd drifted from during the marriage. I even started running again, something I hadn't done since before Mom got sick. The rhythm of it, feet hitting pavement, breath steadying, felt like a small reclaiming of myself. I wasn't whole yet, but I was getting there. The divorce left scars, but they were fading. I thought about Clara sometimes, not with anger, but with a kind of distant curiosity. Was she finding what she'd been looking for? Did she ever regret what she'd said? I didn't need the answers, but the questions lingered like echoes of a life I no longer lived. One day, I got a letter from her, handwritten, slipped into my mailbox at the apartment. It was short, no more than a page. She wrote about her therapy, how she was starting to understand why she'd been so closed off, why she'd settled for me instead of chasing what she truly wanted. "I was unfair to you," she wrote. "You deserved better than someone who couldn't love you the way you needed." There was no plea for reconciliation, no hidden agenda, just an acknowledgement, maybe for her own closure as much as mine. I read it once, then tucked it away in a drawer. I didn't need to carry it with me, but I didn't throw it out either. It was a piece of the past, and I was learning to let the past rest. Life moved forward. I started to notice small things again, the way the city looked at dusk, the sound of laughter in a crowded cafe. I wasn't chasing love or trying to fill the void Clara left. I was just living one day at a time, and that was enough. The marriage, the pain, the betrayal. It was a chapter that had closed, and I'd made peace with it. But as I stood at the edge of this new beginning, I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead, what kind of life I'd build now that I was finally free.